Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our DFS and betting preview for this week's Tour Championship. Gonna try and run it back after last week having all four of our plays finish T7 or better. Had a few GPP takedowns myself, a few in the community as well. So riding hot into this week and just try and run it back and see if we can do it again. So here in this video, gonna break down the golf course, what I'm looking for in my plays. Those will include some key stats, also some comp courses for Eastlake that I'm using to identify my top options. And then afterwards, we're gonna focus on the betting and the DFS side of things, but some of those plays that I'm already mixing in. So a lot to go through here. It's not waste any time at all. It started off with first off, a look at that golf course. I already have a full course breakdown up on my YouTube channel, but here's the Spark Notes version. And we had a renovation before last year's tournament. They tried to make it a little bit harder, but last year it played super easy. In fact, easier than -2.5. So this time around, they took it from a par 71 and took it down to a par 70. So the big change is going to be the first par 5 in the back. That is now going to be a par 4 for players and going to be playing over 515 yards. So, and it's going to add some in-house difficulty there. But last year, we saw a lot more reliance on driving accuracy. Historically, Eastlake was a little bit of a bomb and gouge affair, especially with the overseeded rough that they had for a few years. You could miss in the 3 to 4 inch stuff, and it wasn't a problem to hold the greens. But with the new complexes, them being a little bit firmer because of them returfing them, and the fact that it's Bermuda grass as opposed to any sort of overseed, it was not the case in 2024. And when we look at that top 5, top 10, you saw a lot of your most accurate players with the driver for the week also end up having the most success at the same time. So although shots gained approach is the number one key stat that I have in my modeling this week, that form over the last 12 and 24 rounds reigning supreme, number 2 is off the tee. And you'll notice if you have, the Patreon version here and everything is unblacked out on the right, that driving accuracy is the most important stat there. So this is more of a positional course after they made those changes. And though the greens will be a bit more settled in after them, not being as firm after renovation, it's still going to matter here in 2025. Birdie better percentage, though, is something I'm including, as the scoring last year was easier than most we've seen. Them going down to the par 70 is going to combat that a bit, but still easier scoring than most times at Eastlake. If you want to look at putting stats, form is always good, but also Bermuda grass baseline, as that is the type of agronomy at this course around the green, can't be completely ignored. And although I don't really love comp courses here, as we've only seen it one time after renovation, we don't truly have a good sense for how it's going to play every single time. But with the reliance on driving accuracy and Bermuda grass, as a key part of this agronomy here, I looked at some other shorter, more positional Bermuda grass golf courses. So that would include TPC Southwind, which we saw just a few weeks ago. Week before that was Sedgefield Country Club. Both of those really good comps for this style of golf. And then also Waialae Country Club, which is a lot earlier in the year. That is the home of the Sony Open in Hawaii, is another positional, shorter Bermuda grass sort of golf course. So that's the Spark Notes version of what I'm looking for in my plays. You can still have some bombers that are showing up, particularly if they're good on approach and, solid Bermuda grass putters. But ideally, we want a good iron player. By the way, the proximity buckets that matter more this week are from 175 to 225. So these two buckets right here are emphasized a little bit more than usual. So a good long iron player that is accurate off the tee, that can make some birdies and putt on Bermuda grass, and you're going to find yourself in my player pool for this week. So with that being said, let's translate that to some of our exposure and what I'm doing from the DFS and the betting side. So first and foremost, let's talk through Scottie Scheffler, who I have projected for over 100 Draftkings points this week. That is a solid 15 to 20 point gap over anyone else in the field. And in fact, Tommy Fleetwood, who's my number 2 ranking play this week, is down there at 82 points himself. Still one of the best projections that we have. In fact, I think he's my number 2 projecting play overall, but Scottie Scheffler is just that much better than everyone else. So though the starting strokes are not in play this time around, in the past, he had been $14,000, even $15,000 at this golf tournament because he was starting at -10. He's a little bit more reasonably priced now at just about $14,000. And although he probably has to win the golf tournament to pay off that kind of price tag, he's plus 170, plus 175 to win this golf tournament. So he's got a ton of implied win equity if you're using the sportsbook odds to kind of back calculate that sort of thing. And at this golf course, even without the starting strokes, has been half decent over the years. He hasn't always been the best. Like T22 in 2021 was by far his worst start that he's ever had around here. But even when he started at like -8, -9, or -10 in the lead, he's still usually been at least neutral to the field in all of those events. And starting in first place and with a 10 stroke stroke lead is not the easiest place to play as a PGA Tour player. It's much easier to be somebody starting from the back, trying to make up ground as the week goes on, not with all that pressure from the start of the pack, right? A lot of times it takes a round or two to get that lead, to get into like a 3 to 4 shot lead kind of scenario. None of these players are used to doing that literally from the first shot on Thursday. So I got to give at least some credit to Scottie Scheffler for how he's played at this course over the years. And on top of that, he's got by far the best form of anyone in the field. We don't really even have to look at these. I mean, you know that already with all the wins that he's had over the last few months, but gaining 3.1 shots gained per round, 1.4 shots gained, all coming with the approach play as well, which is, as we know, the most important stat category as well. If we go to the last 12 rounds, it's 3.8 shots gained per round, with 1.7 of those coming with his iron play. Just nothing that we can really point out as a negative data point for Scottie. So really, I think the question for most people out there isn't whether they're going to be using Scottie Scheffler. It's how much that they plan on using in their lineups. And the projected ownership is still a little bit fresh at this point of the week, but I'm projecting him to be about 50% owned, which means if I were to throw him in 75 of my 150 GPP lineups, then I would be matching the field by doing so, which isn't giving me really any leverage in either direction. And at least as of a Tuesday, early on a Tuesday, that's kind of where I'm leaning at this point, is I don't want to kind of win and lose my week based on a Scottie Scheffler. I know that he's by far the best player that we have in this kind of field. And because I'm a 150 max portfolio based style player, I can afford to use them in 75% of my, or 75 of my lineups, 50% of them, and still get enough exposure to where if the rest of my player pool solid, I'm, over the field on the right guys, I can still get the right combination, but also not too many where if he doesn't get there and he doesn't end up winning the thing because it's almost win or bust at a $14,000 price tag, that not every single lineup I'm entering is going to be dead on arrival. So that's where I'm leaning at this point, kind of a 50-50 approach on a Scottie Scheffler, which shouldn't even be leveraged in either direction. In fact, there's even a chance that it is slightly under the field with the ownership. That's the kind of public sentiment that we have on a Scottie. And I know that it's only a 30-player field, and that's going to change up the odds a bit. And I can't remember a time where we had a player that was less than plus 200 to win the event and that people were seriously considering taking him for an outright. So I'm going to use him in DFS. That's personally where I'm going to be getting my exposure. The top 5, the top 10 market are all like minus money, just juiced to the ever-living hell at this point. So there's not really any value to get over there. So maybe the one last spot where we can even grind out any value whatsoever might be in DFS. And heck, that might even mean just going out there and locking him in all 150 lineups or all 100% of the lineups that you're going with to try and get some EV that way. Next up, we got ourselves Tommy Fleetwood, which will be our second core play here. And I am eyeing a top 5 on him, but I have not bet it quite outright on the Hard Rock bet. I just want to do a little bit of line shopping, see if we can get it to potentially drift a little bit to a better number. As Hard Rock bet is one of the sports books where, if you end up getting ties, you're going to get the dead heat odds, as opposed to sites like Draftkings and FanDuel, where oftentimes the odds they're posting aren't dead heat included like you get on a site like Hard Rock Bet. But at $9,900 in DFS, I know for a fact that I'm going to be well over the field on him, because not only is he a solid $4,000 cheaper than Scottie Scheffler, which is massive. My lineups that aren't starting with Scottie, if I go with that 50-50 approach, a lot of them are going to be starting with a Tommy Fleetwood. It gives me so much more flexibility further down the line. And though the pricing is just like last week where it's kind of spread out throughout the tiers, we're going to get some high-owned 6K guys. That's going to be the result of that, just like what we had for the BMW Championship. But by going down to a $9,900 golfer, it gives us so much more flexibility to just kind of hammer this top end of the 6K range, maybe bottom end of the 7K range, which has a bunch of legit golfers. I mean, Keegan Bradley's been $9,000 multiple times this year. Mavic Neely's been $9,000 multiple times this year. Harry Hall is like on a top 25 streak from hell at this point. He's having one of the best seasons over the last 2 months of anyone in this field, and we can play them at the $7,000 price tag. So, if we're not taking a whole $14,000 Scottie Scheffler, if we're starting with guys like a Tommy Fleetwood, we can still mix in another stud or two, maybe another 9K guy, a couple 8K guys on top of a Tommy Fleetwood. And we're rounding it out with players in the 7K range that are normally 8 to 9K players in other fields. So that sort of lineup construction, I feel like the total overall talent of that set of 5 or 6 players is going to be so much better than going with the studs and duds approach, that while I do respect Scottie Scheffler's win equity and I'm going to have to get some exposure there, I just cannot fade it. I think the lineup construction of avoiding that $13,000, $14,000 price tag and going with a more balanced approach has more merit for this sort of golf tournament than really anyone that we've had the entire season, because you can realistically place 6 players in a lineup together this week that a lot of other weeks, a lot of other events would be in the top 5, the top 6 of the outright betting odds. So I think that there's a lot of value with that sort of balanced approach as well. And Tommy Fleetwood is the exact sort of player that I could see myself using in those kind of lineups. So a few things with Tommy. He's first off, number 2 model ranking play that I have in the entire field. The form is the best of anyone in this range, gaining 2.1 shots gained per round over his last 24 rounds. Last 12 measured rounds, he's getting 2.5 shots gained per round, and it's an elite tier fields. It's not like he's beating up on, fall series events, these John Deere classic level fields. It's signature level fields, it's major championships, the last couple playoff events where he's really stood out, which is what makes it so much more impressive than, some of these other guys that have had good performances, but maybe they've been in some of the shittier fields that we've had over the last month or so. A few other things to note with Tommy Ladd is that he fits the golf course as well. If we're looking for more of a positional player off the tee, then that plays into his strengths. He's much more of an accuracy than a distance guy off the tee. And then also a player that if the putting's not going to be as important, I think this is going to be a little bit more of a ball striking fest like what we had last year. And that's also going to play into his favor as well. So $9,900 might even take him for that top 5. I'm looking for like plus 300 with the market where you have the ties, dead heat rolls. I'm looking for like probably plus 300 to bet on that. Currently, I can get that plus 250. Might end up boosting it 10%, getting it to like plus 275 effective odds and getting some exposure that way. But DFS, for sure, something I'm going to be employing him in, and perhaps kind of like with Scottie Scheffler, might even be the best market to do so because, Tommy Ladd, with how well he's been playing over the last few months, is going to be getting that kind of respect from the books. But in DFS, with how many just legit studs we have towards the top, we have as many guys from 9K plus as we have in the 6K range, and that's normally not the case. Like normally the 6K range is so much bigger than what we have up top, to where the ownership's going to be so spread out on this kind of golf tournament where I'm not sure Tommy Ladd's going to get the kind of respect and the kind of exposure that he should in those large field GPPs, which is why I think there could be a little bit of value in getting to these 2 really chalky options, because they're not going to be as chalky as they should be at this sort of event. Before we talk about 2 value plays, I do want to remind you where you guys can find these spreadsheets for yourself. If you guys want to be able to go through the last 12, last 24 rounds of shots gained metrics for every single player that is teeing it up, also event history around Eastlake, recent form for all the events that they have heading in here, make sure to check out my Patreon page. There's a link down below to go out there and join. The golf DFS tier is what you want to have access to if you guys want to download these sheets. Not only what I do for main slate every week, but I also cover showdown for rounds 2 through 4 and give you guys projections for Friday through Sunday. So for the golf DFS tier, make sure to click that link and join it as fast as possible if you guys want links to these. But it gives you every single data point that you need for your research process, everything that I use to build my lineups as a 150 maxer, whether you're a 2 to 3 maxer, a single entry, it gives you all of that data. And even if you're not entering 150 lineups like somebody like myself is, it gives you the perspective and the exposure and exactly the kind of strategy that I'm employing as a 150 maxer, which can be extremely valuable even if you're not entering that many lineups. So join up, help support the channel, of course, when you guys do so as well, and gives you every single piece of exposure and every single research tool that I'm posting for all these events. But the first value play we're going to mix in is going to be Ben Griffin at $7,700. And Ben Griffin's somebody that I've been kind of just hammering over the last few months. His form has been so consistent, and why would it be jump off at this point? He's only $7,700, which I would argue is far too cheap. He's playing much better golf than a lot of the guys in the 8 or even 9K range are. And if you go to the last 24 rounds, you see exactly how he's doing it. 1.4 shots gained per round. He's gaining most of those strokes with his shots gained approach. And though the off the tee play has been slightly into the negative, it's been thrown off by some water balls. And if we go to the last 12 rounds, you'll see that it's pretty much the same kind of stat profile, ever so slightly losing off the tee, but gaining 0.6 strokes per round with his approach play. He's been hot with the putter too, which will never hurt, right? It's not really my number 1 key stat or anything this week, but the approach play is still solid like we were hoping to see there. This off the tee play, though, is I think a little bit misleading because it's been some water balls, some big misses that have really caused him some issues. He's been a lot more accurate than you'd really give him credit for. In fact, he's only been slightly losing accuracy to the field. over his last 24 measured rounds. It's just that of those misses that he's had, slightly more than what the field's had, it's been a lot of, courses where you've had water in play. And because he doesn't take weeks off, he was playing at courses like the John Deere, the 3M, even TPC Southwind. He had a few more water balls than what he would have hoped for. And of course, he had his creatine-induced overdose on Sunday of last week, which kept him from really getting into contention there, because outside of that, he shot like -6, -7 for his last 12 holes. He had that sort of momentum heading into this golf tournament. And if he doesn't shoot himself in the foot, don't take too much pre-workout on the first tee, I guess, Ben. He went with the dry scoop method, as I guess what he was saying in his interview afterwards. It took way too big of a dry scoop. Why don't we leave that to 15 to 20 minutes before we tee off? Let it kind of settle in a little bit, Ben. Try and keep the ball in bounds, unlike what he's done for those last couple events. And he could see himself easily into that top 5. So kind of like with Fleetwood, might even take him in that market. Might stretch that out to a top 10 bet just to be a little bit safer about it. But at DFS, where if he cracks the top 10, that's going to be borderline optimal there because he's only $7,700. If he cracks the top 5, then he's for sure optimal at $7,700. There's no doubt about it that you'd have to have him in the large field GPPs if he can crack that top 5. I think that's a really reasonable ask for a guy like Benny G this week. So he's number 8 in my total model ranking, which doesn't look like a massive value, but at number 13 in the pricing, that is, a lot better than where he would be compared. If at least it was up to my model ranking. This is a value comparatively on DraftKings. And the form, though he doesn't have a bunch of event history or anything, that's the one thing we could say about Benny G is that this is the first time that he's playing at Eastlake. This course was renovated last year, and although the shots required are, pretty much the same, not that much difference from before to after the renovation, the greens are completely different. And a lot of times, this course history and having the experience at a track, a lot of times comes down to knowing the reads on the greens. Those are completely different now that they resurfaced it. So that could help a guy like Ben Griffin out, some of these first timers without a whole bunch of experience, which I think is the cherry on top with that sort of play. And then the last guy we're going through is somebody that does not have experience issues around Eastlake, and that's Brian Harmon. And this is more of a course fit thing than anything. And he's also been playing some sneaky good golf recently. So if you take a look at the total model ranking, he's number 16 in the field, which at number 25 in the pricing, again, doesn't stand out that much because it's only a 30-player field, but comparatively, just like Ben Griffin, that's a really good value when we're looking at the DraftKings price compared to where I have him projected. And if we're looking for accuracy guys off the tee, Brian Harmon's got that. He's a top 50 accuracy guy on tour. And whether it's the last 24 or the last 12 measured rounds, he's been sneaky good. I mean, he's gaining over all 4 stat categories over the last 24 rounds. Go to the last 12 measured rounds, and he's in fact even better than that sample size. He is slightly losing with the putter, but we can get over that. He's normally a lot better when it comes to on the greens, but gaining really significantly in the 2 ball striking categories, which, as you guys will know, if you guys have been following the channel for any given amount of time, that is what we care about the most because it is the most consistent sort of stat categories that we have from event to event. He's been playing in some strong field events, right? Kind of like some of the other guys that we've gone through on here, like a Tommy Fleetwood especially. He's not playing in the John Deere Classic. He was mostly only playing in signature field events, major championships, playoff events towards the very end of the year. So these shots gain metrics, these top level results are against the world's best, like what he's going to have there at Eastlake. So to fit in Scottie Scheffler lineups, to play a $14,000 golfer, I'm going to have to dip down into the 6K range quite often. There are times where if we have a $14,000 to $15,000 golfer and they give us pricing the whole way down to $5,000, that's not the case here at Eastlake. We only have it down to $6,000, so we're going to have some conviction plays down low. And if I'm going to use somebody in 20 to 30% of lineups, which a lot of times our 6K dart throws are only 5 to 10% exposures because they're normally a lot lower owned when there's so many more to choose from. But like I said, with the pricing being so spread out in only this 30-player field, we don't have that many 6K guys to actually choose from. So if we're going to get 2 to 3x leverage to the field, we're going to have to take them in 20 to 30% of our lineups. Big difference, right, compared to what we mostly have out here in tour where it's only 5 to 10%. I've got to feel pretty good about these guys that I'm playing down low. The upside, the top 5, top 10 equity is still really what we care about. By the way, eyeing the top 10 bet on Brian Harmon, that's the market that I'm looking for from the placement perspective. But because we have to commit to them so much more than usual, I also care about their safety and their floor a little bit more. And that's what you're getting with Harmon. We're still getting some upside, maybe not as much upside as a few other players in this range. I will admit that. For example, an Akshay Bhatti or even a Chris Gotterup, they feel like they have the same, maybe if not even slightly higher upside than a player like Brian Harmon. But because it's only a 30-player field, And a top 10 might be enough to pay off this kind of price tag if Scottie wins. Like if Scottie wins, these guys in the 6K range don't have to do as much because you're going to have 6K range guys that mix in Scottie Scheffler into your lineups. That's why I think Brian Harmon becomes a more intriguing play, because like a 12th place finish with like 15, 16 birdies might be enough if Scottie Scheffler ends up getting that dub. So it's not who you play, it's how you play them. That's why we always have to tie this all together. Like if we're going to make Scottie Scheffler work, we're going to have some 6K conviction plays. And it's guys like Brian Harmon that are playing well and good course fits that you're going to see me doing that with. But for the rest of my player poll, for all my projections this week, you guys can find those on my Patreon page. Again, join the Golf DFS tier if you guys want all of that, on top of just the main slate stuff that we cover on a video like this. Also for Showdown over the next few days as well. But that's all I've got. Best luck with everything that you guys are going with, and let's have ourselves a week. Alrighty guys, that is all I've got for the DFS and betting preview this week. Best of luck with everything that you guys are entering, whether it's in the large field GPPs. I hope to see a lot of your names and logos towards the top end of those contests, or it's with any placements or outright bets that you're entering. I hope we can cash out, take advantage of this last full event of this season. Before, we've got the Ryder Cup, the fall events to cover, which of course we will be covering here on the YouTube channel, and all the NFL and football content over the next few months, which I'm not sure if everyone here has, joined us recently or has been a long-standing member of the channel. A lot of the old people, the OGs, will know that we do cover NFL on this channel as well. So if you guys are big into NFL projections on that side, make sure to stay tuned, subscribe so you guys don't miss any of that to come, and join my Patreon page for all of that as well. We will have NFL covered on the Patreon page, just as we have over the last few seasons, and here on the YouTube channel on top of that. But that's all I've got, guys. Best of luck with everything that you're entering. Make sure to stop on by for the live streams over the next few days, covering both main slate and rounds 2 through 4. Tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern time, we're going to have the DFS and fantasy stream on the Ship It Nation YouTube channel. So you may want to make sure you subscribe over there so you guys don't miss that. Be going through ownership, also weather before luck, and how that'll impact play. And then afterwards at 8 p.m. Eastern time, that'll be on this YouTube channel here, is where we're going to go through the prop and the betting side of things. So that'll be underdog and prize picks. Also the sports books, like matchup bets, like on Draftkings and FanDuel. We'll be covering all of that over there. And then for rounds 2 through 4, we'll be doing a similar sort of thing. For Showdown, the fantasy side for rounds 2 through 4, that'll be on the Ship It Nation YouTube channel, either as play is finishing up or a little bit afterwards. And then on my YouTube channel for rounds 2 through 4, going to be doing the same thing from the prop and the betting side of things. So you'll want to subscribe here and on the Ship It Nation YouTube channel so you guys don't miss any of that content when it drops. But until then, I look forward to all the exposure that we've got this week, and let's crush it.